The room was dark, lit only by a circle of flickering candles. The air smelled of sandalwood incense and old paper. Shadows danced across the wooden walls, where ancient scrolls and faded clan banners hung in silence. In the center of the room, Miko knelt in perfect seiza, both fists planted firmly on the tatami mat, head bowed low. Her long black hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and her crimson scarf was folded neatly beside her. She wore her formal shinobi attire, dark navy with red accents, and her expression was calm, respectful, and utterly serious. Her triangular cat ears twitched slightly in the quiet, and her long, fluffy black tail curled neatly around her legs. Across from her sat her master. Master Hiroshi Kin was an old catfolk with silver-streaked light tan hair and sharp obsidian eyes. He wore simple black robes and sat perfectly still, his wrinkled hands moving slowly through a series of meditative mudra. The motions were graceful, deliberate, and ancient. He had not spoken in several minutes. Miko took a quiet breath. "Master," she said, voice steady and clear, "I come before you with a request. I wish to join the frontier line officially, not as a shadow operative, but as one of their riders. I believe I can serve the clan better from the outside. I can scout new routes, gather information the clan cannot reach from within Nishigane. The blue ribbons move through lands we only hear about in rumors. If I ride with them, I can bring back knowledge that may prove valuable." She paused, then added, "And I would still honor my oaths. I would never betray the clan." Master Kin continued his slow mudra signs for a long moment. The only sound was the soft crackle of candle flames. Finally he spoke. His voice was low, raspy, and carried the weight of decades. "And does this request have anything to do with that quiet brown cat boy you have been making eyes at for the past several months?" Miko's ears flicked once. A faint blush crept across her cheeks, but she did not look up. "I will not lie to you, Master," she said quietly. "That is part of it." She lifted her head just enough to meet his gaze. Her dark brown eyes were steady. "But it is not the only reason. The frontier line is growing. They are connecting the continent in ways we never imagined. If I am there, I can watch. I can listen. I can learn things that may one day protect our people. And I believe I can do good work with them. Real work, not just shadows and whispers." Master Kin studied her for a long time, his hands finally stilled, resting on his knees. The old catfolk let out a slow, amused breath that sounded almost like a chuckle. "You have always been a troublesome kitten," he muttered. "Honest to a fault, stubborn as a mule, and far too fond of that blue ribbon for your own good." Miko waited, heart beating a little faster than she would ever admit. Master Kin leaned back slightly, the candlelight catching the silver in his hair. "Very well," he said. "You may join them, officially. Ride beneath their banner, scout their routes, learn what you can. But remember this, Miko of Nishigane." His eyes sharpened just for a moment. "Your first loyalty is still to the clan, and if that boy breaks your heart—" Miko's mouth twitched into a small, genuine smile. "Then I will break his legs myself, Master." The old shinobi let out a dry, rasping laugh that echoed softly through the candle-lit room. "Go then, little shadow, ride with the blue ribbons, bring the night's secrets home with you, and try not to fall too hard for the sunlight." Miko bowed deeply, fists still pressed to the floor. "Thank you, Master." She rose, picked up her crimson scarf, and slipped out of the room without another word. Behind her, Master Kin watched the door close, then slowly resumed his hand signs, though this time there was a faint, amused smile on his ancient face. The barracks were quiet in the early morning light. Pale sunlight filtered through the small windows, casting long golden stripes across the wooden floor. Most of the crew was still asleep, the only sounds being soft breathing and the occasional creak of old timber. Rhett Colton lay on his back in his bunk, staring at the ceiling. His body still ached from the long ride, but his mind was already awake. He turned his head slightly and saw Raven in the bunk next to him, silver-white hair spilled across her pillow, breathing slow and deep. He smiled faintly. Then he mumbled without thinking, voice still rough with sleep. "Gonna beat that 2-day record one day. Full route this time." Raven's ear twitched. Without opening her eyes, she muttered something low and venomous in her native dark elf tongue. It sounded like a curse wrapped in razor wire. Rhett didn't understand a single word, but the tone made it very clear she was threatening to skin him alive if he didn't shut up and let her sleep. He grinned wider. "Sorry," he whispered. Raven rolled over and pulled her blanket over her head like a burial shroud. 20 minutes later, the smell of strong black coffee and sizzling bacon pulled everyone out of their bunks. The mess hall was warm and loud with the comfortable chaos of a crew that had been together long enough to stop being polite. Wyatt stood at the old iron stove, flipping eggs with the same calm precision he used when handling a crisis. Brock was already at the long wooden table, demolishing a plate of bacon like it had personally insulted him. Kane sat beside him, nursing a cup of coffee so black it looked like it could strip paint, while Neera quietly buttered a piece of fresh bread. Rhett dropped into a chair and accepted a steaming mug from Wyatt with a grateful nod. "Morning," he said, voice still a little hoarse. "Morning, record holder," Brock said through a mouthful of bacon. "Heard you're still the fastest on the first route. 2 days flat. Still the one to beat." Rhett shrugged, but there was a spark of pride in his eyes. Was younger then. More stupid. "Still stupid," Raven muttered as she slid into the seat across from him, hair still messy from sleep. She took a long sip of coffee and winced. Gods, this stuff could wake the dead. "That's the point," Wyatt said, setting down a fresh plate of eggs and bacon in front of her. "Drink up. We've got work to do." Kane leaned back in his chair, ears flicking as he stared at the ceiling like he was running calculations in his head. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "there are still a lot of open records. Fastest time on the second route, still unclaimed. Fastest official, full 2-route run, also unclaimed. Neera's the only one who's ridden both routes in one continuous push, but that wasn't a record attempt." Neera glanced up from her bread, a small smile playing on her lips. "And I was half dead by the end," she said quietly. "Wouldn't recommend it." Brock let out a booming laugh. "Half dead? You looked like a ghost that had been dragged behind a wagon for 3 days. I still don't know how you stayed in the saddle." Neera just shrugged, graceful even while eating bacon. Rhett stirred his coffee, a thoughtful look crossing his face. "I've been thinking about going for the full 2-route record one day," he said casually. "Not anytime soon, but someday." The table went quiet for a second. Then Raven's ears perked up sharply. She had been halfway through a sip of coffee when Kane mentioned the second route still had no fastest time. Now her green eyes were bright, almost glowing with sudden focus. "The route through my homeland," she said slowly, "still has no one who holds the fastest time?" Kane shook his head. "Nope, wide open." Raven set her cup down with a soft clink. A slow, dangerous smile spread across her face, the kind she usually reserved for dark elf raiders and particularly stubborn horses. "Then I'm claiming it." Brock raised an eyebrow. "You sure? That western route's brutal. Mountains, forests, and half the time you're riding through territory that doesn't even like outsiders." Raven's smile didn't waver. "All the more reason to be the fastest. My people will hear about it, and the blue ribbons will have another record to our name." Rhett watched her, amused and a little impressed. "Look at that," he said. "Raven's got fire in her eyes now." Raven shot him a look. "Keep talking, you crazy idiot." The table erupted into laughter. Wyatt shook his head, smiling into his coffee. "Records or not," he said, "we've got work to do today. Saddles need cleaning, horses need checking, and Kane's got a mountain of paperwork that's been glaring at him for 3 days. Kane groaned dramatically. "Don't remind me." Brock stood up, stretching until his back popped. "All right then, let's get to it. Day off or not, the frontier line doesn't run itself." One by one, they finished their coffee and drifted toward their tasks. Brock and Rhett heading for the stables, Kane grumbling as he gathered his papers, Nira quietly gathering tools for gear maintenance. Raven lingered a moment longer, staring out the window toward the western horizon with that new fire still burning in her eyes. Rhett paused at the door and glanced back at her. "You really going after that record?" Raven didn't look away from the window. "Someone has to." He smiled. "Good. I was getting bored being the only one with a legendary ride." She finally turned, that dangerous little smirk back on her face. "Careful, Red. I might just take your crown, too." Rhett laughed and stepped outside into the morning sun. The day had only just begun. The morning settled into an easy rhythm. Outside the Frontier Line head office, Rhett and Brock worked on a row of saddles spread across wooden sawhorses, brushes and leather oil moving steadily under the warm sun. Brock hummed an old tune, while Rhett worked the straps and buckles. Inside, Kane sat at the big desk buried under route reports and supply ledgers. 200 pounds of oats for Eagle Fort, 3 new saddle blankets for Pony Fort, and someone still hasn't filed last week's delivery receipts. He rubbed his temples. "If this keeps up, paperwork's going to kill me before bandits do." Nira moved quietly among the horses in the corral, checking hooves, harnesses, and tack. On the porch, Raven drew a whetstone along one of her blades, glancing west now and then with the same determined little smile she had worn at breakfast. A familiar sound caught everyone's attention. The steady clatter of heavy wheels and iron-shod hooves echoed down the main street. An iron road stagecoach rolled into Eastmere from the west, its red and black frame gleaming in the sunlight. 4 strong horses pulled it at a measured pace, and 2 armed guards rode alongside, looking bored but alert. Rhett and Brock both paused their work and watched it pass. Brock wiped his hands on a rag and snorted. "Look at that. They're getting bold, rolling right into our town like they own the place." Rhett smirked, but there was no real heat behind it. "Let them. We still hold the speed records. They can keep the heavy cargo." Brock chuckled and went back to oiling a saddle. "Still, feels like the world's getting smaller every day." Rhett glanced at the stagecoach one last time as it disappeared down the street, then returned to his work with a quiet smile. "Yeah," he said, "but we're still the ones who built the roads." Once it was gone, the yard settled again. No crisis, no urgent messages, no raiders, just the frontier line maintaining the thing they had built. Jokes drifted across the yard between the scrape of brushes, the creak of tack, and Kane's occasional complaint from inside, and one thought kept returning. Tonight. They drank. Lunchtime came slow and easy. The crew gathered around the long wooden table behind the Frontier Line office, the smell of baked beans, fresh bread, and strong black coffee filling the air. It was simple cowboy fare, but after a morning of chores, nobody was complaining. Rhett sat with his boots kicked up on an empty crate, chewing thoughtfully on a piece of bacon. Brock was already on his second helping of beans, eating like a man who had been personally wronged by hunger. Kane sat with perfect posture, sipping his coffee like it was something expensive, while Nira quietly tore off pieces of bread and fed them to a curious horse that had wandered over from the corral. Raven leaned back in her chair, boots crossed at the ankles, looking more relaxed than she had in days. For a while, they ate in comfortable silence. Then Brock spoke up, mouth half full. "You know what I hate about the Greenbelt forest? It's too damn quiet. Gives me the creeps. All those big old trees just standing there like they're judging you." Nira glanced up, a small smile on her lips. "I like the quiet," she said softly. The wind moves through the trees like it's singing. If you listen close enough, you can almost hear it. It's peaceful. Brock snorted. Peaceful until a branch the size of a wagon falls on your head. Give me the eastern prairie any day. Wide open. You can see for miles. No surprises. Rhett chuckled and took a long sip of coffee. I'm with Brock. Nothing beats open sky and flat land. Makes you feel like you could ride forever without hitting anything. Kane set his cup down and adjusted his cap. From a logistical standpoint, the eastern prairie is the most efficient route we have. Good visibility, fewer natural hazards, and easier to resupply. The western route, on the other hand, he trailed off, then added with a small grimace, well, let's just say I don't envy the people who have to run it in winter. Raven had been quiet until now, but she looked up at the mention of the western route. The forests out west are different, she said quietly. Darker, older. They don't care if you're tired or lost. You either respect them or they remind you why you should. Neera nodded thoughtfully. Every stretch of road has its own personality. The prairie is honest. The forest is patient. The mountains. She glanced at Raven. The mountains are proud. Raven gave a small, rare smile. Proud and stubborn, just like the people who live there. Brock laughed. Sounds like half the crew. The table chuckled. Wyatt, who had been quietly listening from the end of the table, finally spoke. Every road teaches you something different, he said calmly. The prairie teaches you freedom. The forest teaches you patience. The mountains teach you humility. And if you ride long enough, you start to realize the land isn't just something you travel through. It's something that travels with you. The others went quiet for a moment, letting that sink in. Then Brock grinned and reached for another piece of bread. Deep thoughts for a man who just ate half a pot of beans. Wyatt smirked. Even old riders get philosophical after enough coffee. After lunch, nobody hurried. Tools came back out, horses were checked, paperwork slowly died under Kane's pen, and the afternoon stretched warm and gold around the office. Every so often someone called across the yard. A joke, a question, a complaint about a stubborn knot in a rope. It wasn't urgent work, it wasn't glamorous, but it was theirs. Later in the afternoon, the sound of disciplined hooves caught their attention. A group of Eastmere Army Rangers rode past on the main road, heading toward the fort on the edge of town. 20 riders in olive drab coats, wide-brimmed hats, and blue armbands with white stars. They moved in a tight professional formation, rifles slung across their backs and sabers at their sides. Their horses were well-groomed and moved with purpose. Rhett and Brock both paused their work to watch them pass. Brock wiped his hands on a rag and gave a small nod of respect. Look at that. Rangers are out in force today. Rhett watched them go, a thoughtful look on his face. Probably heading out on patrol, or maybe they got word of something up north. Brock chuckled. Either way, I'm glad they're on our side. Those boys don't mess around. Rhett nodded once, then went back to oiling his saddle. Yeah, neither do we. As the sun dipped lower and the shadows grew longer, Wyatt stepped out onto the porch and stretched. All right, he called out. Enough work for one day. We've got a free evening and we're all in the same town for once. I say we make the most of it. Brock grinned and stood up, cracking his knuckles. Finally, I was starting to think we'd never get to the good part. Rhett wiped his hands on his pants and looked around at his crew. Saloon? Saloon, Wyatt confirmed. One by one, they put away their tools, dusted themselves off, and started drifting toward the street. The day was done. The night was just beginning. The saloon was already loud when the Frontier Line crew walked in. Zerv's was packed with the usual mix of cowboys, ranchers, merchants, and off-duty rangers. The air smelled of whiskey, sawdust, and grilled meat. A piano player in the corner was banging out a lively tune, while a few drunk patrons sang along badly. Rhett pushed open the swinging doors and grinned. Home, sweet home. Behind him came Wyatt, Brock, Kane, Nira, and Raven. They claimed their usual big table near the back, the one with the best view of the room and easy access to the bar. Zerv was already behind the counter, polishing a glass. He wore his signature white cowboy hat with a large black Z on the front. When he saw them, he gave a sharp nod. "About time you lot showed up," he called. "I was starting to think you forgot how to drink." Brock dropped into a chair with a loud groan. "Zerv, my friend, we've been working. Unlike some people who just stand behind a bar all day looking pretty." Zerv smirked and started lining up glasses. 6 whiskeys to start? "Make it 7, Wyatt said as he pulled out a chair. "One for you, Zerv. We're celebrating tonight." Zerv smirked. He sent 6 glasses to the table and kept the 7th behind the bar. Wyatt raised his glass. "To another season on the road," he said simply. "We're still standing. That's worth drinking to." The crew clinked glasses. Zerv raised his from behind the counter, and they all drank. Brock slammed his empty glass down and wiped his mouth. "All right, since we're doing toasts, to Rhett and his stupid 2-day record on the first route, still the fastest son of a bitch I've ever seen." Rhett grinned and raised his glass again. "Was younger then. More stupid." "Still stupid," Raven muttered, but she was smiling as she drank. Nira spoke up next, her voice calm and clear. "To Raven, for joining us, and for making the western route slightly less terrifying." Raven looked genuinely touched for half a second before covering it with her usual smirk. "Don't get soft on me now, Windrider." The table laughed. Kane raised his glass with a small smile. "To all of us, for somehow not dying this season. Statistically speaking, that's impressive." Another round of cheers and drinks. The night was just getting started. For a while, the conversation stayed light. They talked about small things: sore muscles, annoying merchants, the weird weather on the eastern prairie lately. Laughter came easy. The weight of the season was finally starting to lift. Rhett leaned back in his chair, looking around at his crew with a rare, quiet smile. They were all here, together. No emergencies, no urgent messages, just one night to breathe. Rhett returned to the table carrying the whiskey, tequila, and limes like a man bringing gifts from the gods. He set them down with a dramatic flourish. "All right," he said, cracking his knuckles. "Now we're talking." Brock let out a loud whoop that turned several heads in the saloon. "Finally! I was starting to think we were going soft." Raven's eyes lit up the second she saw the tequila. A slow, dangerous smirk spread across her face as she looked at Rhett. "Oh no," she said. "Not again." Rhett winked at her. "Just like old times, wild one." Wyatt had been watching the whole exchange from his seat. The moment he saw the tequila and limes, he let out a low chuckle and pushed his chair back. "All right," he said, standing up and stretching. "That's my cue. Have fun, kids. Try not to burn the place down." Brock grinned. "Old man's tapping out already?" Wyatt smirked and gave Rhett a pat on the shoulder as he walked past. "I've seen what happens when you lot get into the tequila. I'm too old for that kind of chaos. You kids enjoy yourselves." He tipped his hat and left the saloon, leaving the younger crew to their night. The moment Wyatt was gone, the energy at the table shifted. Rhett poured the first round of tequila shots and passed out the limes. Everyone grabbed one. "To bad decisions," he said, raising his glass. Raven picked up hers, still smirking. "To worse ones." They clinked and drank. The night officially went off the rails after that. The next hour became a blur of laughter, shouting, and increasingly ridiculous behavior. Brock started a drinking game that involved slamming shots every time someone said the word root. Within 10 minutes, everyone was already 3 shots deep and getting louder by the second. Kane, usually the most composed of the group, had somehow ended up standing on his chair, dramatically reciting root statistics, while Brock egged him on. "Did you know," Kane slurred, pointing at nothing in particular, "that the western route has a 34% higher chance of bandit encounters than the eastern route? 34%. That's not a coincidence, that's poor planning." Nira was laughing so hard she had to wipe tears from her eyes. Rhett and Raven, meanwhile, had started their own private war. Every time Rhett poured a shot, Raven would lean in a little closer than necessary. Every time Raven made a sarcastic comment, Rhett would fire back with something cocky and flirty. Their knees kept brushing under the table. Their eyes kept locking for just a second too long. "You're staring," Raven said at one point, voice low and teasing. Rhett grinned, pouring another shot. "Can you blame me? You're dangerous when you're drunk." Raven leaned in, her green eyes sparkling with mischief. "You have no idea how dangerous I can be, gunslinger." Rhett's grin widened. "Prove it." Brock, who had been watching the whole thing with growing amusement, suddenly slammed his hand on the table. "All right, enough of this eye-fucking. New game. Whoever loses has to do a shot and tell an embarrassing story." The table erupted into cheers. The next 20 minutes were pure chaos. Nira lost first and had to admit she once fell asleep on her horse and woke up 3 miles from where she started. Kane lost next and confessed he once color-coded the entire route map by danger level and then lost the map. Brock lost and proudly told a story about getting chased by a bear while completely naked. The details were fuzzy, but the image was unforgettable. Every time someone lost, the table roared with laughter. At one point, Raven reached across the table to steal Rhett's lime. Instead of pulling her hand back, she let her fingers linger on his wrist for just a second too long. Rhett didn't move. He just looked at her with that manic, cocky grin that always meant trouble. "You're playing a dangerous game, wild one," he murmured. Raven's smirk was sharp. "Good, I like dangerous." Nira caught the lingering touch and hid a small, knowing smile behind her glass. By the time the clock struck midnight, the saloon had become a war zone of laughter, spilled drinks, and terrible decisions. Everyone was extremely drunk. Brock was half standing on his chair, roaring with laughter at his own stories. Kane had given up on sitting properly and was now draped sideways across his seat, ears bright red, giggling into his glass. Nira was leaning against the table with a dreamy, faraway look in her eyes, occasionally reaching out to pet Brock's arm like he was a large, affectionate dog. Raven was slumped in her chair, silver-white hair messy, green eyes glassy, but still sharp. Rhett was drunk too, slower, glassy-eyed, and pleasantly heavy, but he was making a deliberate effort to stay present. Between rounds, he had been sneaking water from his water skin, an old trick meant less to keep him sober than to spare himself the morning after. He watched the chaos with a lazy, cocky grin. The table had descended into what could only be described as drunk truth hour. Brock slammed his fist on the table, nearly knocking over 3 empty glasses. "All right, my turn. I once got rescued by a cyclops." The table went dead silent for half a second. Then everyone exploded. "What?" Brock grinned, clearly proud of himself. "True story. Bandits had me cornered in the Red Rock Badlands. Big bastard comes out of nowhere, picks one of them up like a rag doll and just yeets him into a tree. Then he looks at me, grunts, and walks away. Never saw him again. Best day of my life." Kane was wheezing with laughter. "You were saved by a cyclops?" "Saved my ass and my dignity," Brock said proudly, raising his glass. "To Cyclops, the real heroes." Everyone drank. Nira went next, her voice soft and slightly slurred. "I once saw a pack of Nihon Okami," she said dreamily. "The white ones, almost extinct. They were running through the Greenbelt forest at dawn. So beautiful. I didn't even try to follow them, just watched. Felt like the land was showing me something sacred." The table went quiet for a moment, genuinely moved. Then Brock ruined it. "Did you try to pet them?" Nira gave him a look that could curdle milk. "I'm not an idiot, Brock." Raven went next. She was quiet for a long time, staring into her empty glass. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and a little raw. "I saw a thunderbird once." Everyone leaned in. Raven looked up, green eyes hazy but serious. During my first solo run, it was huge. Wings like storm clouds, lightning in its eyes. It looked at me, and I felt it, in my chest, like it knew me. She paused, then added quietly, "I've never told anyone that before." The table was silent. Then Brock, being Brock, blurted out, "Bullshit." Raven flipped him off without even looking. Rhett, however, didn't laugh. He just looked at her, really looked at her, with something soft and understanding in his eyes. Raven caught it and quickly looked away, ears slightly pink. Kane went next, but he was too far gone to contribute anything useful. He just giggled into his whiskey glass, repeating Miko's name. The table lost it. Brock was crying with laughter. Nira was hiding her face. Even Raven cracked a smile. Then it was Rhett's turn. By then, the alcohol had caught up with him. He leaned forward, eyes glassy, and said with complete sincerity, "I died once. Got reincarnated here from another world. A really advanced one. We had flying metal birds and little boxes that talked to each other and could show you anything. It was wild." The table went quiet. Then Brock burst out laughing so hard he almost fell off his chair. "Flying metal birds? What the fuck are you talking about?" Kane was wheezing. "Talking boxes? Rhett, you're so drunk." Nira was giggling behind her hand. Raven just stared at him for a long second. Then she said, "Loud enough for everyone to hear. I don't know what you're talking about, but you're an idiot." And then she stood up. Before anyone could react, she grabbed Rhett by the front of his jacket, yanked him forward, and kissed him hard, right there in the middle of the saloon. The entire table went dead silent for 2 full seconds. Then Brock let out a thunderous, "Whoa!" that shook the building. The table exploded into chaos. Cheers, laughter. Someone, probably Kane, knocked over 3 glasses. Zerv behind the bar nearly dropped a bottle, eyes wide with shock and delight. Rhett and Raven didn't even break the kiss. Instead, without looking, both of them raised their middle fingers at the rest of the crew at the same time, still kissing. Rhett's middle finger was lazy and cocky. Raven's was sharp and defiant. The crew lost their minds. Brock was roaring with laughter, pounding the table. Kane's ears were so red they looked like they were on fire. Nira was hiding a smile behind both hands, eyes sparkling with amusement. Only after a few more seconds did Rhett and Raven finally pull apart. Both flushed, breathing hard, still glaring at the table with matching, "What the fuck are you looking at?" expressions. Raven wiped her mouth with the back of her hand and muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Took you long enough, gunslinger." Rhett just grinned that manic, cocky grin and said, "Shut up and kiss me again, wild one." And they did.
Rider, imagine that. Orphans prefer the job at Red. Mail that moved a nation full speed ahead. Hostile territory where the wolves and more. Pony Express Rider, knowing the score. Pony Express Rider, mail that moved a nation. 18 months of thunder. No vacation. Pony Express Rider. Dedication. 18 months of thunder, no vacation. Pole Express rider, dedication. Only lasted 18 months before it died. Pony Express rider swallowed its pride. Telegraph wire stretched from shore to shore.